everyone. I hope you had a restful evening yesterday. We had a very long, tedious session yesterday. We will resume our hearing today, but before we get to that, may I ask our religious leaders to offer some prayers. Imam C, you have the floor, please.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين وإن تستفتحوا فقد جاءكم الفتح نصر من الله وفتح قريب وبشر المؤمنين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل والله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر وسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Shukran, Imam C. Thank you very much. Bishop, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Lord God of grace, of mercy, of truth, of love, and of compassion, we members of the TRRC present ourselves under your direction, your protection, your guidance, as we seek to bring out the truth in this land, the Gambia. We pray for all who will come before the TRRC, aided by Holy Spirit, that they will come and speak the truth, and that you will help the commissioners to be able to discern from truth from falsehood. This we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Bishop. Council, are we ready with today's witness?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, all. Horeja Balagay would lead our next witness. And may I remind members of the audience to please turn off their mobile phones. Please turn off your mobile phones. And before I yield the floor, may I have confirmation from the OV van that they are ready? Okay, thank you very much. We can proceed now.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, commissioners. Good morning to you all. We are ready to start with the next witness, so I kindly ask the usher to bring in the witness.
I, Amadou Sanneh, do swear that I'll speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Good morning, Mr. Sanneh. Please take a seat. Let me begin by welcoming you to the TRRC. We are grateful that you made time to appear before the Commission and participate in this aspect of our mandate, which is the truth-seeking aspect. First of all, you already know who I am, but I will introduce myself again. My name is Horeja Balagay, and I will be leading your testimony today on behalf of the commissioners. As you know, you are here in relation to the 1996 incident on Denton Bridge, which is something that the Commission is investigating and hearing testimony on. Of course, we will also talk about your victimization as a member of the United Democratic Party, the UDP. So just a few things. There is interpretation going on in the local languages. I understand that you do have a nice manner, so I don't anticipate that you will be speaking too fast, but it's just something for you to be aware of. So maybe I'll just start by giving you a list of some of the topics we'll address today. So we'll begin by a few background questions so that the commissioners can know who you are. So I will ask you a few personal details. We will briefly address your educational and professional background. Then we will talk about your role in politics, and we'll talk about the political climate surrounding the 1996 presidential elections. And then we will move into the main part of your testimony, which is about the victimization that you endured on multiple occasions. So we will first address the 1996 Denton Bridge incident. Then we will talk about your arrest and detention in 2000. And we will also talk about your arrest, detention, and subsequent conviction in 2013. Thereafter, we will conclude with the impact that this has had on you, on your family, on your entire community. And thereafter, the commissioners will ask some questions, and then we will end with a final statement from you. Is that clear?
That is fine.
Thank you very much. So just to begin, can you state your full name for the record?
My name is Amadou Sanneh.
Can you tell us when and where you were born?
I was born in Bansang in 1958.
Do you recall the date in 1958?
Yes, if you want the date, I'll give it to you. 28 August 1958.
Thank you very much, sir. What is your current profession?
I'm a professional accountant and also carry on with politics as well. So both an accountant and a politician.
And we will come to that in more detail. Can you tell us a bit about your educational background? Where did you go to primary school and your subsequent education thereafter?
I attended Bansang Primary School, then went to Crab Island Junior Secondary School for 1 year, from there to New Strat High School, then to Gambia High School 6th form, and subsequently went for my professional studies at the ACCA as the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. That's 81 to 83, and came back, served in various capacities in the government. Then I went back in 91 to do my master's in business administration at Manchester Business School for 2 years. So I came back in 93, July 93, to resume work as a government employee.
So by profession, you're a certified accountant?
Yes.
Can we talk about your career? Where did you begin your career, and give us an idea of your progression up until 1994?
After 6th form, I was employed by the Gambia Public Transport Corporation, then known as GPTC, as an accounts trainee. And they sponsored my professional training in the UK in 81 to 83. And when I came back, I joined them and worked until sometime in '84. And then I moved on to the National Investment Board, NIB, where I served until '87. '87, I was made managing director of the then Livestock Marketing Board. I served there '87 to '90. Then I was moved to the defunct Commercial and Development Bank as managing director designate, understudying British, one Mr. I think David Thwaites. I was there for about 8 months, but in '90, when it was decided to privatize the bank, again I was moved to the Office of the President as financial advisor. That's where I worked until I went for my master's in business administration, and then came back to President's office. Again, I was reassigned to the National Investment Board as Director of Corporate and Capital Markets Department. So that's where I was until '94, July. Again, I was called by the then Secretary General, Larry Sisse of the AFPRC, and said, no, we want you to come and serve as Accountant General. Then I moved to the Accountant General position, '84 to '86. And then I was redeployed back to Ministry of Trade as Deputy Permanent Secretary in '86. And then that's where I resigned.
Do you mean
my
96?
position.
Sorry
Sorry,
to interrupt.
96.
So Accountant
Thank you.
General between 1994
94
and
and
96. And
Yes.
then,
Apologies for
no, that's perfectly fine. And
So,
then Ministry, please continue.
Ministry of Trade in '96. So I just spent some months there, and I thought this is not the kind of government I want to serve in. I resigned my position. Then I went to private practice.
Thank you very much for that overview. We will start at the point where you were appointed Accountant General. Do you recall when in 1994 you were appointed Accountant General? How long after the July 22nd coup d'etat?
Actually, it wasn't long. I think towards the end of July, August, I was called in by the then Secretary General.
As Accountant General, how would you describe your role? What was your role?
As Accountant General, you manage all the resources of the government, public funds. You're supposed to account for all of them, and then all the expenditures of the government goes through your department, from salaries to procurement of consumables in offices and so on, payment of electricity and so on. All the expenditure of the government goes through the Accountant General. So then we bill our accounts, usually annual accounts, which the Auditor General audits.
As Accountant General, were you reporting to any particular ministry?
Yes, we are linked to the Ministry of Finance, and we had frequent interactions with the Permanent Secretary, and the Minister also sometimes requests for information or meetings. We do oblige on those.
I would like to get a sense of your experience working for the AFPRC regime between 1994 and '96. So in 1995, you would have been reporting to then Minister of Finance, Mr. Usman Korosise, is that correct?
I think initially, at one point it was Balagava Jahumpa. And then later, Korosise came in. So I was dealing with both. I dealt with both of them.
I'd like to focus on Mr. Ousmane Korosise himself.
Yes.
We have heard testimony about circumstances surrounding his death, so I just want to ask you a few questions in case you have information that would be useful to the Commission.
Yes.
First of all, how would you describe Mr. Ousmane Korosise?
I've worked with Ousmane Korosise at the National Investment Board, and I would say we were close in terms of relationship, and we discussed a lot. So as a person, I think I'll be in a position to say something on him as a person, his character and his stance. I would say he's a very intelligent, very vocal and forceful with his views, and I would say also is a very straightforward somebody. So I think his character is one that really stands out, and if he's in public, his discussion and so on, he always stands out. That's how I remember him as a person.
Now, as far as you were aware at that time, do you know if there were any financial or budgetary disagreements between Mr. Ousmane Korosise as finance minister and members of the AFPRC regime? Would you have any information about that?
Personally not. I wouldn't, because that will be at the level of the council with them. But I know him as a person. He always stands up for his views. It doesn't matter what the condition or who he's dealing with, he always takes his position.
Did you yourself have any interactions with any members of the council during your time as Accountant General?
Yes, we had interactions. Now and then they will pop into the office, like one occasion when Sanneh and his group of security officers burst in, just surprising call. They're just looking around and they saw the pictures on the wall, and then they say, oh, you know, this should not be here, and they brought it down. They thought this was Jawara's picture of people of the former regime, the PPP regime, but I explained to them these were pictures of former accountant generals that were lined up in the wall. So it just shows the force and the authoritarian attitude that they come up with. And when they need something, they have no respect for procedure. They don't want to follow processes. And, well, working in government for so many years, you know, I know systems are institutionalized. You have to work with processes and procedures to achieve your ends. But one, I think they've displayed a lot of ignorance in government system, and they have no respect for what was established rules and regulations at the time.
Do you have any examples of that?
It's like a frequent display. I wouldn't be able to say a particular thing, but it's like I come and stand and they say, this is what I want this done now. But if you know government system, sometimes the payments have to go through a process. You have your internal audit department, you have your other units that process things, but they don't want to listen to any of that. I want this done, I want it now. So it's more like authoritarian, and at the end it reflected in a dictatorship attitude that we've experienced over the years.
Well, you've told us about an encounter with Sanneh at the time. Did you interact directly with any of the other members of the council at any point while you were accountant general?
Yes, sometimes then the chairman, Yaya Jammeh, would call and we'll go to his office at State House. And at the time, they were just new in government. And he would be ranting about, well, I need to know where these people have kept the monies of this country, otherwise I'll kill all of them. You know, he was very forceful in his speech. I would say
People was he referring to?
the PPP regime. So I would try to explain what exists and where the government funds are. And I think when they took over as accountant general, we really found significant reserves of the government, the central bank. So that was something they have no knowledge at the time. So I can explain to them, look, the country's resources are intact, but it's like somebody who's angry and he has a preset mind against the former regime. They'll have to tell us where they have kept these monies or I will kill them. These are some of his statements. But he always does that. He keeps ranting, sometimes feels so uncomfortable because he'll go on, maybe if I go like 1 or 2, you'll be there till after 6. He'll be ranting and ranting, on his...
1 or 2 in the afternoon until about 6,
6 in the evening. Yes. He keeps you there just talking about himself and what he wants to do.
What were some of the things that he would talk about at that time, apart from the PPP?
Some of the stories he was saying, like he goes to Marabouts and tell them, I want you to kill Yaya Jammeh for me, So these were some of the things he said. It's maybe like a prelude to what he planned to do. So he said most of them were lying, they cannot do anything, and he told stories, his encounters. I think one of them was with OJ. I remember him saying that, whether he confronted him or sort of tried to arrest him or something like that.
Which OJ? Which OJ are you?
That's Omar Jallo, the former minister. So maybe the details are not clear, but at least it rings back some of the things that he was saying. But it's a lot of talk that are really not material to governance or to the run of the country. He would talk about himself and his aggression, that he displays his aggression towards the PPP regime, the members of the PPP.
Do you recall on how many occasions you had such interactions with Chairman Jammeh as he was at that time?
It would be a few, I would say almost 3-4 times. On one of these occasions, I think I was there with Honorable Fafambai, who was then Minister of Justice. We were both there. And if I can speak for him on that occasion, we were both just disgusted and felt that, our time was really abused. We had to stay long hours listening to this, and this man talking.
So still trying to get a sense of what it felt like for you working within the AFPRC government at that time. You talked about lack of respect for procedures. You talked about ignorance, as you called it. You also talked about the interactions that you had with the chairman at that time,
yes,
as well as the incident with Sanneh.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about what it felt like for you working within that regime?
I was a civilian, they were military. Actually, it was just threatening. Every day you go to work. And with the environment in the country, with their actions outside the office, against the population, against the people that they have detained, we all have information on that. So,
what are some of the incidents that you're referring to?
Okay, like one of the incidents at Westfield, Sanneh and his security, where they shot a driver, taxi driver, they shot at that. I didn't see the taxi driver, but I happened to pass by, and then a lot of crowds, people were saying things. So I can remember things like that happen. Then those that they detained, how they treated the former managing directors and officials, senior officials, bundle them up into a truck, parade them through the streets to carry them to detention. I thought it was grossly inhuman. I couldn't share with those values. I thought, really, the way things were going, I cannot continue with this group of people.
You told us that in 1996 you were moved from your position as Accountant General
Yes.
to the Ministry of Trade, where you were the Permanent Secretary.
Deputy Permanent Secretary.
Deputy Permanent Secretary. Can you tell us what led to that move?
Actually, there was no reason, there was no warning, and it just came. One day I was at the office, so we had some of the officials, military, and so on. They just came, crowded my office. We want you to come. You have to hand over everything. And when I started taking my diary, no, you have to leave everything here. So even my private diaries, I had to leave at the Accountant General. So I just went with my little briefcase, which I told him is personal.
Do you remember who was in charge of that group of soldiers that came to your office?
No, I wouldn't be able to say these are the particular people, but these are the ones working with the AFPRC. So that's how they change you. No notice, no warning, no reasoning, nothing was given. That's how it happened.
How long did you remain at the Ministry of Trade?
I think I went there sometime around March and resigned in August, so I didn't stay too long there.
And what led to your resignation? Was there any particular event or incident, or was it a culmination of factors?
Actually, it's a culmination of all these 2 years, 3 years serving with this group of people. And I thought this is not really what I think the Gambia deserves, and I cannot continue to serve with these people. So I fixed an appointment with the then Secretary General, Mr. Wada, and explained to him my desire to resign. And he was very supportive, said, Sanneh, I think that's the best thing for you. Just write, I'll approve it. And I wrote, and he approved the resignation. I handed in my leave and so on, so I left.
By this time, you had been in government for quite a long time.
Yes.
And it's always a problem when lawyers start calculating, so I'll just say a very, very long time.
Yes.
What did you do after leaving government?
Actually, myself and one of my colleagues, Sanneh, we set up a private practice, AA & Co., it's Chartered Certified Accountants, and we opened an office one Independence Drive Banjul, said we're going to work for ourselves and no more for this government.
And during that period, did you engage in any political activity?
I think shortly after we opened, then the UDP was being formed. And when I knew about it, I decided, I have to throw in my lot to make a change for this country. So I joined the UDP in '96 then.
Do you recall who you joined the UDP with? Was it with a group of individuals, or did you join on your own?
For me as a person, I joined as an individual and found quite a group of people who had the same commitment, the same feeling that I had. So we worked together from then.
Can you tell us a bit about what you refer to as who had the same commitment and feelings that I had? What are you referring to in particular?
These are the people who were founding members of the UDP. Like the Secretary General, Hussein Udabu. You have Job Kante, who was really a very strong force behind the UDP during those difficult times. He was sponsoring a lot of our activities, and at some point provided us with the office in Banjul, in their complex, Alhaji Malankante's place, and we were not paying rent at that time. So he played a significant role, and I worked directly with him in the finance section. It was at the first Congress I was appointed as National Treasurer of the UDP. So you had the late CDS Sanneh, you have Ibrahim Amane, he's now ambassador at Freetown, and have the Amadou Charles, and so many others. Simul Nyasi was there, late Simul Nyasi, and so on. So if I start counting names, I'm sure I'll miss quite a lot. But I'd say the whole group that were there, both elderly and also the youths that were there, that served the party.
So you joined the UDP soon after its formation,
Yes.
and you were appointed the National Treasurer.
Yes.
Did you participate in any elections yourself? Were you a candidate?
Yes, I tried to gain a seat in the National Assembly for the Upper Fladu constituency around Bansang area, but unsuccessful for all the attempts, 3 times. It was unsuccessful under the prevailing political circumstances at that time.
So can we talk a bit about the political climate in 1996 when you joined the UDP? Can you tell us a little bit about the UDP's experience campaigning for the 1996 presidential elections?
It was more of an environment of harassment, terror against UDP mainly, other parties, but I think UDP stood out as the main party that had to bear all the brunt of the brutality of the AFPRC regime.
For the sake of clarity, which were the other parties at that time?
At that time, I think DOI was there, the NRP was there, maybe I don't remember the others, but I think these 3 parties were there. So UDP came out as a stronger force, and really the AFPRC focused their brutality and terror on members of the UDP. They would deny us permits for meetings. One of the cases where the late Femi Peters, we applied for a permit to hold a meeting at then Cedar Club near Afrisel, and the permit would not come out. So we decided to push ahead with the meeting anyway. And it was a case where Femi was arrested, tried, and sentenced to prison. He was serving in Old Joswam prison for some 6 months, I think, or so, just for holding, trying to hold a meeting, because the meeting was dispersed by the security forces.
Do you recall what year that was, that particular incident?
No, I wouldn't say specifically, but this was before my imprisonment. Somehow I wouldn't be able to give exact dates on that. There were other meetings where they would disrupt their paras, and then, like the tour that the Secretary General was conducting around the country when they were returning, the reception that was shown in combos, especially Serakunda along the highway from Abuko to Westfield, I think that displeased the AFPR regime, and they took on that terrorizing aspect of sending paras to disperse and beat, militants or supporters. That's where they were tearing off their shirts and doing all whatever they could.
Sorry, when did this incident take place? What are you referring to now?
I think this was around the 96 tour, I think, this happened.
And we'll come to the returning tour, the latter part of that tour. But before that, I want to understand much better the relationship between the UDP and the security forces around that time.
No.
Generally.
The security forces became an apparatus of oppression for the AFPRC regime. They were no longer security for the Gambia. They were agents of brutality, mainly for the AFPRC regime. So I'll give you incidents like we had recorded meetings of the UDP in Banjul, and these tapes were scattered to our members around the country. So at Bansang, some of our supporters who were listening to this, they were arrested for just listening to a rally that was conducted in Combo. This is the kind of police that we had. Then there were other incidents where on a tour, some of UDP youths were stopped. One is in Malafi Sanyang, then in the state guards, state house, blocked their way, said no, they cannot continue to the villages that they wanted to. And he produced a pistol and threatened them. So there was a heated exchange. The youths were also adamant that this is their right. They are going on this tour. So in the end, they went to report the matter to the Brikama police station. They said, no, we cannot take this case. You have to take it to Bansang. They went to Bansang. Bansang police would say, no, this has happened in the jurisdiction of Brikama police. So they were being thrown back and forth. None of these stations were willing to take the case. So this is how bad it is. And if you have a case as a UDP, some of it, I wouldn't be able to remember the specific cases. When you go and report the matter, they say, look, you people are UDP, we cannot take your matters. So it's like we are excluded from the security, the justice that is supposed to be done in this country. So all we received was just bare brute force and oppression. Denials in radio, television coverage, they would cover all the APRC meetings, but none of the UDP That's the GRCS team would come. They wouldn't dare even if they wanted to. So that's the environment under which we operated.
Were there any public displays of support or partisanship by either the security forces or any other government institution?
Yes, we would see APRC flags at police stations. And they would put on APRC badges on their uniforms as security forces, you know. And then they would use project vehicles and other vehicles in their tours and their rallies, government resources, to do their campaign. All these were blatant. They will also use the chiefs and the alcalos, the then governors and deputy governors were mainly July 22nd members. They posted in all the regions. Their role was mainly to campaign for the APRC, not to work for the development of the country. The governors were also instrumental. And in my own case, Upper Flood West constituency, the then governor, Amadou Bojang, whom I knew, he was a sixth form classmate, but then he was serving the APRC. What he would do, he would take his pickup, put armed soldiers, and then go around the villages. They would terrorize the villagers. If you don't vote for the APRC, you know, we'll come, we'll deal with you, we'll shoot you, we'll do this and so on. These are the strategies. The alcalos would be threatened. If you don't encourage your voters to vote for us, we'll remove you as alcalo. The same thing to the chiefs. Because all the powers of appointment for alcalos and chiefs then rested with the president. So we've taken away all the civil rights of the population, you know, and just put it under his own wings. And he used those instruments, you know, to propel the APRC, you know, subdue the country, you know, because people were really afraid. I'll tell you also, in the meetings that we have, especially in the combos, during the day, few people would dare turn up. But when it becomes dark, then you see the crowds coming in at that time, because they don't want to be seen or to be recognized by these people who had their intelligence people planted in us every time. We didn't mind, and we knew they were there. We just carried on with our duties and say, this is what we have to do under our constitutional rights.
So what you've described essentially was a hostile environment as far as your experience. Very hostile environment, yes. You mentioned that some of the supporters would not show up during the day, but they would show up at night when it was dark.
Yes.
Are there any examples or reasons why that's the case? Is there anything that would happen to supporters who showed up during the day, for instance?
Especially those who were walking. We know people were just being fired for suspected, you know, suspecting them of supporting the opposition. You know, the civil service was then just torn apart. The Gambia used to have one of the best civil service then, which was really related to career progression, which really the Gambia excelled. And we had times when I was at the NIB, then we had officials from Sierra Leone coming to understudy the Gambia civil service. You know, it was exemplary then. Permanent secretaries were appointed based on career progression. Some of them will come and start as assistant secretaries. They will go serve as deputy commissioners in different regions in the country, as commissioners, come back. So you climb the ladder through, you know, principal assistant DPS to permanent secretary. In those days, I think if you call somebody a permanent secretary, he deserves the title. But with the APRC, you could see they were even putting secondary force as permanent secretaries. They destroyed the fabric of this country's administration. And we are left with that remnants of that destroyed civil service.
So you've told us quite a bit about the political climate at the time. Mm-hmm. I would like to focus on the nationwide tour that was conducted by the UDP. You said under your Secretary General. Mm-hmm. Who was the Secretary General at that time?
Alhaji Hussein Daba was the Secretary General.
Did you participate in the nationwide tour?
No, we did our own campaigning in the combos. Some of us were left behind to do the combos, while the team with the Secretary General was sent up country, around the country on tour. On that particular occasion, I was not.
Did you join the tour at any point when they arrived in the combos?
Yes, we received them when they came from around Talinding, the crowd, and we moved with them. Then it was decided that we proceed to Banjul, and we then had the convoy, and I was in the lead vehicle. I was driving my car with my late friend Bakari Sidi Dafe, and I had Yankuba Diba also in my car, and some other, maybe I skipped. So we headed for Banjul.
So just a couple of questions before we proceed. Do you recall on what day that occurred?
I think that was 22nd September, 96.
And you said your vehicle joined the convoy. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a bit about the size of the convoy?
We had quite a large number of vehicles, actually. There were 2 trucks that were carrying the youths. One truck we call Democracy, the other one is Human Rights. They were full of these youths who were very active and participated very effectively in our politics. So you have other private vehicles and then other hired vehicles, passenger vehicles like the Gele-Geles and so on.
So would you describe that as a large convoy?
Quite a large number of vehicles, yes.
So from what you've told us, you joined the convoy at Talinding, and then the plan was to proceed to Banjul.
Yes.
During that journey between Talinding and Banjul, can you tell us if anything happened along the journey before you got to Banjul?
We headed to Banjul, and on our way, after Joswang, if I recall, some of these security vehicles were overtaking us on the other side of the road. That's the road coming from Banjul. They were rushing ahead of us. At the time, we did not know what was happening, but it looked odd that they would take the other side of the road and just race across. So we went.
How did you feel about that? You said it was odd, but was there any particular feeling about what was happening?
No, we didn't know what they were doing. Security forces were going on the wrong side of the road. That looked quiet to us, but we didn't think of anything bad then. So maybe it's something on their own errands and duties, but we proceeded anyway.
Around what time was that?
It was in the evening. It was getting dark, yes. I would say after 8, 9, I don't know.
So around after 8, 9 on the 22nd of September, yes. 1996. Can you tell us a bit about the members of your group? You were coming from a nationwide tour, rallies, campaigns. Can you tell us a bit about how people were dressed, for instance?
No, a lot of people were dressed in party colors, T-shirts, and you had scarves and hats. And then it was a display of party support in whatever form that anyone could. If you had a T-shirt, you wore it. If you had a yellow shirt, you wore it. Scarves or hats. Everything to show your affiliation to the UDP.
So it would be very clear for anyone that that was a group of UDP members and supporters. In terms of your group, can you tell us a bit about the makeup of the group? You told us that there were a lot of youth in the two trucks, democracy and human rights. Were there any women involved? Were there old people, young children, for instance?
I would say there is quite a mix. There were female youths, women, young people. Some of the people in other vehicles could be elderly people, I would say elderly people. Old people would be, yes. So it will be a whole range on the age spectrum there.
In terms of security, you told us about the relationship between the UDP and the security forces at the time. One question would be, were any of the people in your group armed with any kinds of weapons or any means of, for instance, either protecting themselves or doing something?
No. I think throughout the 22 years of the APRC when I served in the UDP, still serving though, I've not seen any instance where our tour or our members would take up weapons or anything of that sort, or assault items during these campaigns. I think we adopted a policy of trying to effect change through the rule of law, through constitutional means. That was our strategy. So we were not a rebel group, we were not an armed group, or so. We use the Constitution as our guide. We have our rights, which we are denied. Like the meetings I told you, we filed our case in the court and we won in terms of getting the permits. But the police still, they use their bureaucratic muscle to deny us the permits, or they'll give you a permit when you're holding a meeting Saturday, they'll give you Friday afternoon. You cannot make announcements and so on. All those are tactics to frustrate the UDP.
So this group of youth, elderly, women, a large convoy, around 9 p.m. On the 22nd September, 1996. You told us that some of the security forces passed your vehicle, driving on the other side of the road. You didn't know what was happening. Can you tell us what happened after Josh won?
We drove, I was the lead car, and then we have others, democracy and human rights following me, and the other vehicles with some of the other members. So when I arrived at Denton Bridge, I found already surrounded, the road was crowded with armed soldiers. And we had to say, calm down, you know. They forced us to go off the road towards the police station. I say, park this car and get down, get out of the car. So when we got out, they said, go and we sit down. There was a big tree then, I think. You have to sit on the ground, you know. So we were stunned. The democracy, the human rights trucks were also parked, and maybe a couple of other vehicles, and then they blocked the orders and forced them to turn back.
So just a few questions before we proceed. So your vehicle was stopped at Denton Bridge.
Yes.
and then told to go on the side of the police station. Would have been the other side of the road, is that
Yes.
correct?
Going to Banjul on the left, yes.
Exactly. And so quite a few of you were stopped and told to get out of the vehicle.
Yeah.
You mentioned that there were armed men. Do you recall which security forces they belonged to?
There were soldiers there, mainly, I think, soldiers with arms. They were even firing, some were firing over our heads. And I think lately I recall also they even shot the tires of one of the trucks was shot. One of them was shot.
Apart from the soldiers, were there any other security forces present at the bridge as far as you recall?
I wouldn't know if the paramilitary were a part of them because I would confess it was getting dark. So it's only the lights from the station, maybe the vehicles that you could see.
So even though it was dark, you could still see to some extent what was happening because of the lights from
Yes,
the station and the
we could
vehicles?
see them, yes.
And so you were forced to go to get off your vehicle and you said sit down in front of the station itself.
Yes.
Up until that point, were you told anything else apart from get down your vehicle?
There was no discussion, there was no negotiation, there was nothing. It was all instructions, authoritative, instructions, do this, do that, do that, that's all.
And you said they were shooting up in
Yes.
the air as
Yeah.
well as
One of the
vehicles.
the tires were shot, yes.
How did it feel at that point, experiencing that and not knowing what was happening at that time?
Well, you can imagine the terror that they showed. People who were armed, and you don't even have a stick. You didn't expect it. Really, I would say all of us were terrified at that point. We really never expected it at that stage.
Can you give us an idea of how many armed men were present at that time? Just a rough estimate. Are we more or less than 10, for example?
It is much more than 10. And, I would assume maybe in the 20s, 30s, I don't know. It's quite a sizable group. Okay.
And at the time that you were stopped and told to get off the vehicles, at that point, did you notice if anyone was in charge of that group of armed men at Denton Bridge?
Yes. Let's say, I recognized Yankuba Ture and later confirmed with my colleagues, that he was actually Yankuba Ture was present. The late, how do you call him? Is it Almamo Mane was another that we found to be there. And my colleagues will also discuss with Edward Singate was there. So, but I saw Yankuba was there. Almamo, I never knew him as a person, but with my colleagues that confirmed that they knew he was present.
So at that point, you identified Yankuba Ture yourself, and your colleagues also confirmed that he was present.
Yes.
Your colleagues told you that the late Almamo Mane was also present.
Yes.
And then your colleagues told you that Edward was present.
That's
Which
right.
Edward are you referring to?
Edward Singate, former FPRC.
So if we just focus on Mr. Yankuba Ture, can you tell us what he was wearing, for instance, that day, or what led to your identification of him?
I think at the bridge, all of them were wearing military fatigue. The senior officers, especially when they stood aside discussing amongst themselves. You could see they were mainly dressed in military fatigue.
And how were you able to recognize Mr. Yankuba Ture?
They were talking and not far from us. They were not far from us. We were sitting on the ground, and then we were seeing them. They were discussing on their next action against us. You know, that's the senior command of the group there. They were standing and discussing this.
Now, at that time, what was Mr. Yankuba Touré's position?
He was a member of the ruling council, and I believe then the Minister of Local Government.
And prior to that day, did you know him before that?
Because we, as working in the government, as Accountant General, we made several meetings, and you know, I knew him, I recognize him as a person, yes.
So you would be able to recognize him?
Of course, I would.
Very easily.